My name is Bob Edwards, thanking you very much for all the kindnesses that you've given me over the year. I'll be leaving now, joining the Army, I presume.
From National Public Radio in Washington, this is Bob Edwards.
Well, it's nice to see a lot of friends here, and we're going to just have a conversation this evening. There are cards that if you have something you'd like to ask Bob, fill out a card and someone will bring it up here. And in his book, Bob talks about Bob speak, which means that he asks a question and then he shuts up.
Sure.
Which is is very important when you start listening to other interviewers. So Bob, I'm going to do Bob speak. I'm going to ask you some questions and then I'm going to shut up. And so because you're here, WHEL Radio was your first job. You have a connection with New Albany, and talk a little bit about that time period in your life and WHEL Radio. And
now, see, we never called it WHEL. WHEL was an earlier incarnation when it was a country station.
Mm-hmm.
And out at the site of the tower, I forgot where it is. I remember I used to have to go out there and turn the station on. There was an old promotional billboard or something with a wagon wheel. And it said, "Roll your dial to WHEL." So that was the WHEL generation of WHEL. No, by the time I got there, it was the home of the world's most beautiful music. It was just a half step above elevator music. It was, Sinatra was an up-tempo. I went out and bought Basie, Ellington, and Earl Hines to just, put some life into it.
so you had to drop the needle and cue the records up and all that.
Yeah, it was old school.
These folks probably don't know that.
But I'm very grateful to New Albany, and always will be. Will always, have a special place in my heart. You got to begin somewhere, and nobody else wanted me, and New Albany took me in, and so I will always fondly remember New Albany.
And how old were you?
21. I was a senior at U of L. I was working my way through college all the way, but I could not get a radio job. I was, everything but radio. I kept getting fired from all of them because I was going full-time to school at night. So I was a bad student and a bad worker, but I had to get this degree because there was the draft. And if you didn't get your degree before the draft, oh Lord, you had no options. Anyway, I finally just decided I'm sick of this. I'm going to go hang out at a radio station until I work on radio.
And you found one.
Yeah. So they were good to me.
So how about growing up in Louisville also?
Yeah, I did.
You did.
Oh, yeah, whenever Louisvillians meet anywhere in the world.
You have to give
your high school.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm a Cimex guy. I'm on their board of directors now, and we had a board meeting this morning. In fact, that's really why I'm here. We just built everything else around it. So I'm being here for the board meeting. And U of L, night school.
Okay.
Then I got drafted. So I'm totally up to date on this community in 1969.
Okay.
It's changed a few things.
Well, it has. It has. Downtown, we don't have a bridge anymore, so.
That's a good thing, though. I'm glad they closed it.
Are you really?
Well, yeah, the alternative is unthinkable. So they'll fix that thing and you'll have a better bridge.
Have a better bridge when we're done. Part of, the big part of your life was NPR. And in reading your book, and by the way, you notice that we do have books on sale over here. It kind of sounded to me like it was Wild West.
Yeah, at the beginning?
At the beginning, and talk a little bit about NPR and its origins.
I got there in '74. They were less than 3 years old. And so they had no standards at all, so I was hired. But they couldn't afford to hire veteran people to do that thing, so they hired young people. We were all young. I was 26, I think. I was one of the senior people. They paid me a grand sum of 15 grand. And that's what they could afford. So they had to hire young people, barely out of college, but that was exciting. It was like a big dormitory.
Oh, yeah.
And we had few resources, so we had to experiment. We were forced to try stuff and see if it worked. There would be the occasional piece of great journalism, but surrounding it would be interviews with dulcimer makers and the sound of a quilting bee and the chatter of the quilters, and it was the 70s. It was, back to the earth, and it was, whole
That's
earth,
very comforting.
whole earth catalog, kind of, touchy-feely, just post-hippie America. And we were all part of that because we were young. But it was exciting, and couldn't be duplicated once it became NPR, and very serious news organization. The organization I left was just totally different from the beginning, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
It was less fun, but it was listened to, and doing a fabulous job. Opening bureaus at a time when the rest of journalism was closing bureaus. 17 bureaus overseas, NPR has, and dozens domestically. It's a news empire.
What year was that?
That they did that? Wasn't
No.
1 year, it was over a course
No,
of
but
30
you
years.
were hired.
I was hired in 74.
74. And who were some of the other names? I know in reading your book, the names.
Well, Susan was already there.
Susan
Stanberg was my co-host on All Things Considered, and I learned how to do interviews from her. She was just a fabulous, and is a fabulous radio personality, and natural. Ira Flato was there doing science news. We had like 5 reporters. We had 5 reporters. Linda Wertheimer was one of them. She covered Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I can see all the heads going up and down.
And so they were lifers, and they're still around. And the others would come after me. And I realized the arts were in the ascendancy then. The arts ran in.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't much of a news organization at all. But behind me came more newsies. Scott Simon and Cokie Roberts and Robert Siegel and Neil Conan and Leanne Hansen. And suddenly we were a news organization.
All those names we've heard.
Yeah. Most of them still there.
Most of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cokie went to ABC. I think all the others I mentioned are there. Oh, Leanne just retired. So, yeah.
What were the wages like?
Appalling. Just worse than a lot of local radio stations. And we were this big network. Not yet we were. Ultimately, we organized, got AFTRA in there, and the salary's pretty good. I gotta say, I was not complaining there at the end.
Today, they're pretty good. As you mentioned, something you're making $75 a week.
Yeah, at WHEL.
Yeah.
When the other station in town, and you corrected me on the call letters of that station, called me up and said, "Well, you sound pretty good, young fella. What are they paying you over there at WHEL?" I said, "Well, $75 a week." "Oh, I'm very sorry."
Sorry about that.
Click.
And we were talking before.
That's the last time somebody in broadcasting offered me a job until XM.
We were talking earlier.
And they didn't offer me a job, did they? They were just inquiring.
Well, I think the guy that made that call is still in town.
Really?
Yeah, and I was kind of hoping he would show up this evening. I was kind of looking around to see if he's here.
I'd send him my air check and we can work something out.
Good. Where's NPR get its money from? I know we've all heard the local telethons.
They get it from the stations. Stations pay dues to belong to NPR. In addition, NPR gets money from foundations, from corporations. They've gotten quite sophisticated in getting money. They got this enormous grant from Ray Kroc's widow, just about the time I was leaving, 7 or 8 years ago, which they've invested. They have a foundation now. They have an endowment. They've gotten quite sophisticated from the little fish fry that I joined back in '74.
Well, and you talk in your book a little bit about.
But they get next to nothing from the feds.
Well, that's where I was going to go.
They get like 100,000.
Is that
it's
all?
like some kind of training grant or something. The federal dollar is much more important to the local stations than it is to NPR. But by extension, how do they pay their NPR dues without federal money? So
Exactly.
yeah, some of it is passed on that way.
Our local high school radio station was originally one of the NPR stations.
Oh, really?
And then they got priced out of the market very quickly.
Different business plan.
It does. Does politics enter into NPR at all?
You mean internal corporate politics?
Well,
of course.
internal and external.
In any organization.
Yeah.
I think it does, not in the way you would think. I think NPR is very fearful of its image, of it being labeled liberal. And I think they pull their punches because of it. I think they are not as bold as they could be because they're afraid something will be taken as liberal, particularly when there's a Republican administration. And I think they're not as daring, and I think it affects the journalism. I do. I think they do a great job of journalism, but I think they could be doing a better one if they just stopped worrying about the image and just did the news. They're going to get hammered anyway. You cannot please the Rush Limbaugh crowd unless you are doing what they're doing. Anything less, and you are, what, communist or something, or
Something else.
Born in a foreign country. But you are either with them or you are nothing. So you're going to get hammered unless you're doing Rush Limbaugh. And they don't want to do Rush Limbaugh, right? So just do the news. Don't worry about the image. Because they're going to hammer you anyway. They're getting hammered as it is.
Now, how do they pull punches? Do you have anything in particular?
Oh, I couldn't say torture. It's enhanced interrogation techniques.
Okay.
That might upset the Bush administration. There's phony balance. I believe in fairness. I don't believe in balance, artificial balance. I wanted to do an interview on the Telecommunications Reform Act. That's what it was called. And this was bipartisan. Bill Clinton was a big supporter of this and helped sell it. And they said, it was going to help competition. Well, it was going to do the opposite. I could see that coming. For one thing, it lifted the restrictions on the number of broadcast properties any one corporation or individual could hold, which was once 5 stations, then it was 7 stations, and they were going to lift it beyond that. Then it was 7 AM and 7 FM. So they lifted those, and what happened? One company ended up owning 1,250 radio stations. Now that is not good for America, it's not good for broadcasting, it makes for schlocky radio, it's many fewer voices heard because it's concentration of ownership, and it's tough on workers, and I'm a union guy because if you get fired from one channel and you're not going to, one station, you're not going to work for the other 1,149, are you? So it was just bad all around. I wanted to do an interview about that. And they finally relented and let me do it. But they came behind me and followed that up with a commentary by some industry tool who said this was going to be great for competition, it's a wonderful thing for America, and it was crap for America. I mean, there was just no two sides to it. So, but that was balance. Well, it's crap. It's like bringing a liar on to balance the truth. I don't think that's right.
Fine.
Just saying.
Well, and there is, I think people look at NPR as liberal, more liberal than they actually are.
Oh, yeah. I never thought of them as liberal at all. No, never. I never thought of myself as liberal then. I think I probably am now.
More liberal?
Yeah, I don't care anymore. I'm not doing a daily news program. I'm doing a long-form interview program. I'm probably never going back to doing daily news again. So I'll let my, you can probably tell from the stuff I do now, how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or in this conversation.
Well, maybe this is the time to ask about, I noticed the big button about the union and ACTRA and your relationship, what's going on there. And I know it's changing some.
Yeah, we're getting killed. Unions are getting killed all over the place, and I think that's been responsible for the demise of the middle class. I think unions were important in building and establishing. Between unions and the GI Bill, I think it helped to level the playing field. And you didn't have to be super wealthy to get by in America. Well, that's changing. You're going to have the very, very wealthy and increasingly more and more poor, as we learned last week. We now have 1 in 6 Americans living in poverty. And that's only going to increase if we keep going the way we are.
All right.
Oh, God.
These came from the audience. I'm gonna start with this one. I loved your interview series with T.R. Reid from Japan. How did this come about, and did you enjoy doing it as much as listeners enjoyed it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's not Bob speak.
NPR did not have anyone overseas until Morning Edition started in 1979. We put Robert Siegel in London to coordinate BBC coverage and develop a network of stringers in Europe and elsewhere. So what we used to do was call up newspaper reporters. And Reid was one of those, and he was in Japan. And most fabulous American reporter I think ever in Japan. He knows fluent Japanese. The Japanese are just amazed at how he has this command of their language. But yeah, that started because we used to call newspaper reporters overseas, and they were our foreign correspondents. We would just talk to them. You do two-ways with conversations. You'd not ask them to do reporting. Nowadays, you get reporting from NPR correspondents, Sophia Pojol and others around the world in those 17 bureaus. But yeah, and Reid was just so good. He's just a great gabber. He's funny. He's very articulate. He's smart, and he's entertaining. And he understood. I'm on the radio. I'm performing. And yeah, we've stayed in touch. And when I go to Colorado, I drop in.
Well, we were upstairs earlier, and there was a young lady interviewing you from middle school in Jefferson County, and I'll let you ask a very interesting question. What was your favorite interview? And I liked your answer to that.
If you'd like me to answer that.
I would like you to answer that now, yes. What would be your favorite interview?
Real quick on the pickup.
While you were drinking it.
My favorite is a Jesuit priest named Gregory Boyle, who lives and works in East Los Angeles and works with young Latino gang members and there's so many gangs in the LA area. And he helps get them out of gangs and into productive lives and finds them jobs and trains them for jobs and actually starts companies to employ them and then turns the companies over to these ex-gang members. So they're running a cafe, the homeboy industries. The Homegirls Cafe, there's a bakery, there's a landscaping business, a silkscreen business. And, he's saving my life, He's keeping these gang members straight. He's got 10 doctors working for him to remove tattoos because it's gang sign and it marks them for assassination. They can't go straight without, looking a little straight. And he's not able to save them all. He's saving lives, he's not saving souls. I don't think he cares if they go to church or not. And the LAPD hates him because they've given up on these kids. They just want to mow them down. And they want him to rat them out. And he won't do it. He's a priest, he believes in redemption. And he knows they can be saved. And made whole again. And he hasn't been successful entirely, and he's very articulate about talking about the ones you could not say. He tells some very sad stories, but also some very funny, positive, wonderful stories. He's just great radio, because he speaks in Sunday homilies. He's used to doing it. I've talked to him twice for a full hour, and in the second hour he never repeated one story from the first hour. He's got more. He's got plenty.
Yeah. Well, were you in competition with WOWI? As I recall that was Wowie Radio.
I guess so. You're in commercial, in the commercial market. I think while I was there, we had our first rating ever. I think it was like 1.2. And it had never shown up in Arbitron, ever.
Yeah.
So everyone was, wow, 1.2. Wow, you probably had 3 or 4.
I'm going with the second question here. And this is an unsigned question, so I'll let you know. What the hell was NPR thinking when they showed you the door?
Well, they didn't fire me from the network. I chose to leave in the aftermath of their removing me from my program. They reassigned. And that would have been okay. I mean, I didn't like it, but that would have been okay if they had not trashed me. Their explanations weren't going over well with the public, who wrote 50,000 emails to them. Stations didn't care for what they did because they did it in the middle of a fund drive and didn't warn them. So listeners were taking it out on the stations, which had nothing to do with it. I'm not giving any money here, you're fired by that. So that was horrible. Horrible business. So they started making stuff up and lying about it. And that was it. I couldn't work for them. Now those people are gone. Okay? So I never blamed NPR. It was just those people. And they're gone. So NPR and your local public radio station are so worthy of your support. And this is an institution that's more vital than ever in an atmosphere of screaming maniac media and partisan media and declining newspapers, and boy, do we need good information on the radio.
Have you made your peace with NPR?
Yes, very much so. And I'm part of the public radio system, you know.
You're back now on Saturday afternoon.
In some years now, it's been like 5 or 6 years. And I will go pitch on the air for WAMU in Washington when they have their fundraiser in a few weeks. And they carry my program. Why wouldn't I go pitch? We're here in Louisville, WHEL.
Let's go with a little lighter here. Red Barber. Loved your interviews with Red Barber. How'd you meet him, and what were those interviews like?
Morning edition started with designated segments: art segments, business segments, news segments, sports. Sports. We had no history of doing sports. It was public radio, so we filled it with commentary. Frank DeFord was one of the original commentators, still doing it.
Yes.
And Kepsel Levine, who was the designated sports producer, asked Red Barber to do it. She had interviewed Red about Jackie Robinson, because Red was at the microphone of the Brooklyn Dodgers when Jackie Robinson broke the color line. And she loved that interview so much, she asked him to do a regular commentary. And Red said yes, but he did not want to read a script. Did not want to do what Frank DeFord. He wanted it to be a conversation with the host of the program, live. And that just terrified me. But thank God he did that, because I learned how to do seat of the pants radio. Spontaneity. It was the only spontaneous thing about Morning Edition, was that 4 minutes live every Friday. And it made me a better broadcaster. And it was the most popular thing on NPR, and I think it built the audience, so I thank him many times over for all of that. And he was now retired in Florida, and so we didn't talk much about baseball. We talked about what his cat was up to.
Well, we do have a clip here.
What was growing in his garden. I think the clip you have, we actually did talk about sports. I think this was the day that the first Persian Gulf War began.
Right, and Karen's going to run that clip for us here, yeah. I really like Red's voice.
Commentator Red Barber joins us now from Tallahassee, Florida. Red, good morning.
It's a good morning down here, Bob. It's clear. The forecast is possible showers this evening. And right here by my stopwatch, I'm looking at a beautiful Julio Nuzio variegated camellia. I think that's the most beautiful one that I have. And also the azaleas are beginning to pop out, and so are the Japanese magnolias.
The Julio Nuzio.
That's right. The Julio Nuzio is the parent camellia, and that's probably won more awards than any other camellia. And the variegated has white and pink.
Well, Red, since we last talked, we've gotten ourselves into a little war here, and debate is going on whether these playoff games for the NFL and the National Hockey League All-Star Game should be played.
Bob, as you know, I was broadcasting actively in World War II when Pearl Harbor hit, etc. And 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor, I was the announcer for the championship game, the Giants and the Bears, at Chicago. And as far as baseball went, Judge Landers, then the commissioner, turned to President Roosevelt and said, what do you want us to do? And President Roosevelt said, as long as you don't ask for anything or withhold anything from the war effort, I think it's important for the morale, not only of the people at home, but for the armed forces. Go ahead and do the best you can. So he gave baseball a green light. And I'm sure that the people in sports today will turn to the White House, and if the White House wants them to shut down, fine. But otherwise, I don't know why. You're not taking anything from the war effort. And remember, I've done 5 USO tours. The troops overseas get very bored. And these troops in Saudi Arabia, I understand, are very bored. And I think that they'll want to know how these football games are played, and certainly the Super Bowl. That's my feeling.
That's right, you went to Vietnam, didn't you?
Yes, I went to Vietnam in 1967 when it was hot, when General Westmoreland was in control. And I know that the people were very much interested in what was going on at home. They keep bringing up the thing about professional football played 2 days after President Kennedy was assassinated. That was nothing about a war effort. That was just a very insensitivity, very poor taste. And Pete Rozelle has said many times that that's the big mistake he made.
Of course, there's something else besides the appropriateness of it. There's a security factor, obviously.
Well, how are you going to keep people from getting in a crowd? Bob, I think that the best thing we can do is just go ahead and do the best we can with our normal lives. And in fact, at the moment, I'm thinking of the first 4 verses of the 90th Psalm, which was written some 2,500 years ago, right where things are hot over there in the Middle East. Lord, thou hast been our refuge from one generation to another. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever the earth and the world were made, thou art God from everlasting, and world without end. Thou turnest man to destruction. Again thou sayest, come again, ye children of men. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night.
Red, thank you much. Talk to you next week.
Okay, Colonel.
The comments of Red Barber are a regular Friday feature, morning edition.
I really did enjoy the
Well, now you should know the context of that.
Okay.
The vice president for news came down and said there was to be, we were not to do this, not to do that, not to this. There was to be no mirth, no fun, no nothing. This was the day of war, and no Red Barber. I said, whoa. Whoa, come on. This guy is a professional broadcaster before we were born. You know, this is nuts. Of course you're going to talk to Red Barber. And I knew he'd knock it out of the park. You know, look what he did. Ending on the psalm.
Yeah.
He would do that to me. He would drop a psalm on me every once in a while. Yeah, they don't teach you in journalism school what to do. How do you follow a psalm?
Yeah. Say thanks, Red.
But he always, well, he always put it at the end, sort of a little benediction there. Red was a lay reader in the Episcopal Church and took this responsibility very seriously. he would hold prayer services on the road for the Yankees. And he and I think Bobby Richardson. Yeah. And oh gosh, his competitor. Who was his competitor? Bill NBC, the great broadcaster from NBC, was his rival, because Red was CBS. And used to refer to Red as that sanctimonious psalm-singing son of
a... You don't mean Bill Stern, do you?
Bill Stern, exactly right, Bill Stern. Yes, he was not wholly liked by his rivals.
Well, back to some from the audience. How are your guests selected, and how do you prepare yourself for your interviews?
This is someone who has listened to my current show. That's good. We're in the contemporary world now at last, yes. I do a long-form interview program now. I might have one guest, I might have two in the course of the month. I have a great staff, and it's a collective process of the 10 of us, and what we've read, and who we're interested in. It's not just me, it's them as well. Fortunately, they're all a lot younger than I am, so I get new and fresh ideas from them and learn. But yeah, it's those things we're interested in. But they know what I'll do and what I won't do, and who I'll like. And I bet Bob would like this, yeah. I nearly always do.
From newspapers or
books,
just all sorts?
Magazines, scholarly publications, all the different, we all read different things for different people.
And then how do you prepare then for the interview?
Well, if I've done the research, I've read the book, I've seen the documentary, I've heard the CDs, I've gone online, I've done research, and they do that as well for interviews that they've prepared. I don't prepare them. When I was on Morning Edition, I never did an interview with an author whose book I had not read. I can't do that because it's not me introducing other reporters and then doing this feature over here. The whole show is mine, so I can't do the research.
Now, this question is, what's your opinions on the state of broadcast journalism in an age of infotainment?
Yeah, the infotainment is bad enough. What you have now, I was just reading this fascinating piece in one of the journalism reviews about how we're getting less video. There's less video. We're seeing less on our screens on television. Consequently, there's less reporting. What there is in its place is chat. So they will fill the set with talking heads to talk about something going on in Lebanon rather than point a camera at it. And this is money. This is about the economy. This is about saving money. This is trying to do news on the cheap rather than putting reporters in the field. The reporters that are in the field are too busy to go ask the hard questions of the Prime Minister and find information because they are tweeting, and they are on Facebook, and they are blogging, and they're having to do their employers' shows in multiple time zones and be part of the chat rather than go report. And so there's far less reporting on television now than there was before, except for Al Jazeera, who's still pointing the camera, and they don't assemble talking heads in the studio to chat about it. They go out and report. With a point of view, yes, but they're reporting.
Sure. What do you think of NPR's firing of Juan Williams? And what about the entrapment recording of NPR's fundraising representative?
Yeah, a lot of empty jobs at NPR.
Yeah.
Both of those things. They now have no CEO, no development director. These are open positions. The vice president for news, and the general counsel's job is open because he's the interim CEO. There's 4 big positions open. The firing of Juan shows that they still don't know how to fire someone. They haven't learned anything in 7 years about that. It was grossly mishandled. Whether he should have been fired or not is I don't know, I can go both ways on it, because he said something really stupid, and that's bad, but they allowed him to be a commentator over here and a reporter over here, and how can you shoot your mouth off on television, as they're all encouraged to do, and just say, you know, whatever is off the top of your head and not think. When you're over here doing this measured piece of reporting or analysis, and these don't mix. These don't mix, because they compromise, this compromises what you're doing over here. I'm not saying they shouldn't have allowed him to find other work in business, but few organizations will allow that. You report for us and only for us. But it was always a bad thing. They always made them nervous. And this was inevitable. This was going to happen. But he did say something stupid. I tried to work the Muslim garb into the, every sentence, on the air for weeks, and nobody got it.
Well, somebody here asked.
And the development director, the development director was punked. Some dirty tricksters set them up. And it made it look like NPR was going after like $5 million of Arab money, and they didn't, and no such request was made, or it was crap, and it was highly edited. And edited with a heavy, heavy hand, a partisan hand, and it was Glenn Beck who pointed out that these right-wingers were doing NPR wrong. Glenn Beck.
Give him a gold star. Somebody, one of the questions here asked if you would be willing to come back to NPR. So with all these positions open, can we expect a news article here?
As we've learned in Kentuckiana, don't burn bridges.
Now, on this side of the river, it's Indiaki. Yeah, you're on the wrong side.
Well, I'm in public radio. It's not NPR, but it's Public Radio International. I don't know. I doubt if they want it.
You've spent many years in Washington. Please compare and contrast today's leadership with some of those you've been around over the years. I guess talking political leadership rather than leadership at NPR.
Well, there used to be more compromise, more civility. There used to be Republicans I could vote for and did. John Sherman Cooper, the first senator I voted for, a lad across the river. They got along, and things got done. And now they don't, and things don't get done. It's pretty simple. Coky's father, Hale Boggs, used to have a little bourbon and branch water with the Republicans across the aisle. And more stuff got done that way after hours.
Yeah.
But that was cool. They got done. They worked together. Sam Rayburn and Lyndon Johnson and Richard Russell would be friends with Everett Dirksen of Illinois, the Republican leader. And it was good for the country. This is a zero-sum game. Not only must I win, you must look really bad. You must die. That's wrong.
Then we have a presidential year coming up.
Oh boy. Won't that be fun?
What was the worst interview you ever had on Morning Edition?
No, we never put that one on the air. We put the worst ones on. Wow, I did one with Andy Warhol. It was interesting. Andy came in on some substance, I don't know what. Clearly his two very young male friends that he came with were coked to the gills. That was easy to figure out. They were giggling through the whole thing. And Andy had written a book, and I said, Now you feel the such and such, and he said, I do. I said, yeah, it's right here on page 25. It is. That was the Andrew. But my boss was determined to put that on the air because it's Andy Warhol, so he did.
That bad.
That's the same guy who canned me many years ago.
Still a raw spot, isn't there?
Oh, just facts. He did.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little on the process of learning the stagecraft of broadcasting? Says any growing pains, bloopers from your rookie year to veteran reporter?
You know what I used to do when I was in high school is I would go down to WKLO or WHEL or WOWI too, and ask those guys to help me. And several of them were enormously helpful. One is Reed Gaden.
Still here.
Yeah. And another was John Scharfenberger, who went by the name John Sharp on WKLO. And he would give me news copy, take me into a production room, and have me read it and tape it, and then he would critique it. And when you're a teenager and a professional does that for you, it's I put it in the book because I'm grateful to this day. So I was pretty confident, going into when I finally got to do it. I had mic fright for years, horrible mic fright. I would start thinking about what I was doing. Everybody's listening, and I get short of breath. Even I was still at NPR before I lost it. I was already, yeah, I didn't lose it till I got there. I have to admit that now. But yeah, people were helpful to me, and I had a great mentor at American University, after Ed Bliss, who could teach me writing, and that stays with me every day. I keep thinking he's listening, even though he's been dead for some years now. But he could be listening to me. So I go back and change that thing. I don't let that sloppy thing go. I go back and fix it. And it's good to have people like this in your life. Susan teaching me how to do an interview, Red Barber.
Yeah, you're very complimentary, both Ed Bliss and Susan Stanberg in your book, that the help and the friendships.
Yeah, you don't get better unless you're open to instruction and getting back. I'm waiting for more mentors. I'm still going to do better than I do.
All right. Is there a snowball's chance that the middle class will find an outlet for its voice? I don't know, somebody's going to jump up and give us a sign here in a minute.
Well, I'm not a philosopher. I don't know. I hope so, for the good of the country. Yeah.
Fine. We're going to wrap it up here. We've got about 3 minutes, and Bob's going to sign books. We have a table set up over here, and we'll pull another table out for you. If you would like to purchase one of Bob's books, he will stick around until everybody's got what they want. And any other questions for Bob? We're going to, yes, sir. Doctor.
There was no journalism degree at U of L when you were an undergraduate. So what did you major in?
They had exactly one journalism class, and I took it. Yeah, as an elective. All they offered at night was business. So I was a business major. I was a management major. I graduated with a BS in commerce. That was it. That was the only option, because I couldn't leave home. I couldn't live elsewhere. I had to live with the folks and work my way through. Otherwise, I would have been drafted and been the biggest, clumsiest target in the infantry, and I wouldn't have lasted 30 seconds. To get the degree, you have some talking points, and I went into the Army and told them, it's the one time not to be modest. So I told them, oh my God, they were missing out. if they weren't hiring the next Walter Cronkite as a broadcaster. And it worked. I ended up doing the 6 o'clock TV news in Seoul. And that was my war. And then I'm coming back from Korea. We touched down in Japan to refuel, and I hear this sergeant yelling at me. And, you know, I wouldn't turn around. And the sergeant finally said, "Bob." Oh, well, he wouldn't know me as Bob. I turned around, and it was a classmate of mine from St. X named Paul Ogden, who I saw 2 nights ago. He was first in line with a book. And so this is in the book, too. And Paul was coming back from Vietnam. And I said, "Paul, you're a sergeant first class. How in the hell did that happen? We're the same age." And he says, "Well, I was in this tank and everyone kept dying, so they kept promoting." So I didn't tell him how I spent my 2 years. He found out in the book.
All right, and thank you very much, Bob Edwards.